It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
And welcome into another edition of Musso at the Box. LSU will face off against South Carolina on Saturday in the semifinals of the SEC tournament with a trip to the SEC tournament championship to be played Sunday on the line. South Carolina earns their way back into the game after defeating Kentucky 6-5 on Friday afternoon in Hoover. Very good ball game. South Carolina took a 3-2 lead early in the game. Kentucky would storm back, take a 4-3 lead. They'd tie it up at 4, and then ultimately South Carolina would take a 2-run lead, 6-4. Kentucky would scratch across 1 in the 8th, but go quietly in the 9th. And South Carolina fights their way through the losers bracket and will face LSU. Saturday, as a reminder, of course, will be single elimination. So even though LSU is 3-0 in this tournament, they only have to be beaten once, and they will go home. Same for South Carolina, although I guess technically for Carolina, it would kind of function as double elimination because it would be their second loss. But it is single elimination. So we will get you an updated preview on that game. Look at the pitching for each team. Who might you see start? Who might you see in relief? Things of that nature, some keys. We'll get you set up on all of that. Also, projected fields of 64. We have 2 new ones to look at, and there is a change for LSU that I do want to touch on, and it does factor in kind of to the weekend in Hoover. So smash the like button if you have not already. Get subscribed up on the YouTube channel if you have not already. Get subscribed up on your favorite podcast app if you have not already. It is greatly appreciated, and happy to have you with me. Let's dive right in. Let's start, before we get to South Carolina LSU, let's start with the fields of 64. So here's the deal, right? Everyone has asked all along, what is LSU playing for this week? I've been telling y'all since they swept Ole Miss, I thought they were in. That point is moot now because LSU has won 3 games in Hoover. So they're absolutely in. The final nail in that coffin was Georgia, and then LSU just kept putting nails in the coffin for the hell of it. And in turn, could they improve their seeding? That's ultimately what they were playing for. LSU is not going to host a regional. We have talked about that. You had 13 wins in the regular season. Right now, you're sitting on 16 wins against SEC foes. Even if you win the tournament, you're still just 1 game above 500 in SEC competition, we'll call it this year. And that's just not going to be enough to bump teams in front of you. Like Mississippi State, who's in the losers bracket in the SEC tournament right now, still has a better chance of hosting a regional than LSU. Like if Mississippi State comes through that and makes the tournament championship, they could squeeze one in, squeeze off the hosting bubble and into that spot. But I mean, Georgia, who lost day 1 to LSU, has been sitting pretty in that 8th national seed spot. So there's just not a path for you to get there in your own conference, let alone with everybody else around the country. So that's not going to happen. You could move from the 3 line to the 2 line, and that's what everybody was looking for. You've now made the weekend. That's a huge jump, and it is reflected in these projections. Let's start with D1 baseball. D1 baseball has LSU as a 2 seed in the Stillwater Regional. When we go through these, y'all know how I feel. I'm more interested in the seeding than anything. The seeding is more projectable than where the committee is going to send teams. In this case, LSU would be a 2 seed at the 13th national seed. I think that's where we all kind of expect LSU to fall into this, is somewhere in those teen seeds, which means if you win that regional, you would be paired with a top 8 national seed. In this case, in this projection, it would be Texas A&M and College Station. And I know that might excite a lot of people. That's going to be a really tough matchup if that is what comes, to fruition. Again, this is just a projection, and we're focusing more on the seeding, but just for, argument's sake, yes, LSU beat A&M 2 out of 3. You had that game at home. That would be a lot different going on the road. A&M has lost 3 games all season at Bluebell Park. So just keep that in mind. But as an aside, this is the second or third time we've seen LSU projected to Stillwater. That would be really interesting. Just because that ballpark's a damn launching pad. Like, I don't know if y'all have noticed the last 2 or 3 years, the regionals in Stillwater, it's been like beer league softball. It's like been like 15-13. The park, and it's not small. The ball just jumps out of there. The dimensions are actually really similar to Omaha. They modeled it off of that park. The ball just completely flies out of there, though. So that would be really interesting because LSU does have a very powerful lineup. So if they do get sent somewhere like Stillwater, that is very offensive, especially with how the lineup's going right now, that would be a very interesting matchup to watch for LSU. Baseball America, likewise, has LSU a 2 seed, but they have LSU in Norman, Oklahoma, with the Sooners, who they have as the 7th national seed. That's a little higher up than I thought LSU would be. I kind of just mentioned it. Figured LSU would probably be in that 10 to 16 range there. So to have them at 7, that's not the draw you're looking for. Like, not to say LSU can't go do that. I mean, with Jump, with Holman, you feel good, right, getting those 2 games, and you see what happens in your third game. But I would rather LSU go to a more manageable regional and then see what you can do in a super potentially against somebody else. You get into a super regional and anything can happen. Obviously, and in a regional too, but not to say LSU couldn't go to a top 8 regional and win it. That actually might be your. Again, is there any such thing as an easy super regional? Probably not. But I mean, if you're looking, you take out the top 8 first, and then have to go through a 10 or an 11. Okay, maybe you look at that as an easier path, but there's really no. I would rather LSU have the quote-unquote easier path in the regional round, and then, you get to the final 16 teams there, and everyone's really, really good at that point. But that's where they have them. So both have them LSU at on the 2 line. They got there before even making the tournament championship, which tells me they're probably pretty locked in those spots. I think LSU could lose the game Saturday against South Carolina and still be the 2 seed. I also don't really think there's that much of a difference between the 2 and the 3. It's going to be the home team. And I know everybody always wants to bat last, but that's not a prerequisite to winning. LSU's been the road team in Hoover for the 3 games that they've played. They've won them all. So if that matters, sure. But, I mean, you don't get to just pick home and away all the time. You're dealt the hand you're dealt, and you go try to win the ball game. So I don't really see that big of a difference there. But if you like being able to see the tangible impact of what they've done, they've moved off the 3 line to the 2, and I think they're safe there. I think they'd be a 2, win or lose Saturday. So I really and you can't get to a host. Your postseason is locked in, and I'm very curious how that's going to impact LSU's handling and strategy in the game Saturday against South Carolina. The one other thing I will say on postseason before we start previewing the Gamecocks is this. While you're not going to host the regional, there is always the outside chance that you could host the super. And here's how that happens. In this case, since LSU is not a top 16, they're going on the road, you would need the top 8 and the top 16 regional hosts to both not make it out of their regional. Do you understand what I mean? The host would have to lose, and LSU would need a 3 or a 4 seed to win the corresponding regional to automatically host the super. If you have dueling 2 seeds, we'll use the 2 because that's what LSU's projected as right now, win it would go to a bid. And yes, you would assume that LSU would win that bid. You would assume that is not a guarantee. None of this is a guarantee. And I know it sounds very far-fetched in a sense, but this happened last postseason. Southern Miss won a regional as a 2. Tennessee won a regional as a 2. They were paired up. It went to bid. And again, you would assume Tennessee would have won that bid. They did not. Southern Miss did and hosted that super regional. So if you're looking for the foolproof way, have both hosts lose and have a 3 or a 4 lose the corresponding, and it would automatically go to LSU as a 2. If two seeds win it, it goes to a bid. And yes, again, you would assume that LSU would win that bid. I would assume that as well, but you just saw Tennessee lose a bid last year in this exact scenario to Southern Miss. So that is the path to postseason ball at the box. It is not a likely path, but it has happened before as recently as last season. I would just go into this saying LSU is going to be on the road for the entirety of postseason, but the important part is LSU is going to be in the postseason. All right, let's talk about the game against South Carolina. So first and foremost here, do a little math, and you can see that LSU is in a better position right now than South Carolina. Like if LSU was looking for the, again, quote-unquote easier path to the tournament championship, it was 100% South Carolina, not Kentucky. South Carolina has played 4 games. They have not had a day off. LSU has played 3 games, and they have had a day off. If Kentucky would have beaten South Carolina, they would be in the same position as LSU. They would have played 3 games, and technically they had Tuesday off. South Carolina has done none of that, and their pitching is in a very precarious spot. We will get to that momentarily. LSU's is in a sense too, because it goes back to what we said. Their postseason fate is locked in. They're going to be a 2 seed somewhere at this point. How does Jay Johnson handle this? Because what you're not going to do Saturday or Sunday is pitch Jumper Holman. I would be so against that move. Like that, that would be malpractice. I don't care how long you would throw them. I don't care. Just rest them. You winning an SEC tournament championship has no value right now. It doesn't. Do I want to see LSU do it? Of course. We love when LSU goes to Hoover and dominates. It's the LSU Invitational. We know that. But it serves no value for you. So I'm not saying don't go out there and try to win and play your hardest. I'm just saying don't put yourself in a precarious position or don't put yourself in a spot that could lead you to be in a precarious position come regionals. So Jump Holman, they're done. You look at everything else that LSU might have left. Griffin Herring is available come Saturday, and that's good. He threw 33 pitches on Tuesday. Gavin Guidry is obviously available on Saturday. He threw 35 pitches on Wednesday. Then you really have to kind of have a conversation about some of the guys that threw Thursday night. Like Christian Little. Christian Little's not pitching. The only way you see Christian Little pitch again in this tournament is if LSU does make it to Sunday. And even then, when we talk about the, putting yourself in a spot that could lead to a precarious position in the NCAA tournament, I don't know if you even do that. He threw 51 pitches on Thursday night. Justin Lohr, absolutely available for Saturday. Threw 14 pitches, had a day off. He's good. Fidel Ulloa threw 32 pitches. With the day off, you could maybe get an inning out of him. Nate Ackenhausen in the same way. 35 pitches Thursday, day off. You could maybe get an inning out of him. I don't think you're getting length out of either of those guys. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I believe they'd be extremely effective. I can tell you Nate Ackenhausen in his career at LSU and this year has not been great twice in a weekend, and that would be the equivalent of twice in a weekend. Pitching one day, having a day off, pitching again. That is the equivalent of that, and that has not been an effective strategy for him. Fidel Ulloa, sample size is small, but from a sheer availability standpoint, you could get those guys to give you an inning. So who starts the game? That's a much more complicated question. The easy answer to that is Sam Dutton, but they're not going to let Sam Dutton go deep. He's going to be an opener. So if you go Dutton and he goes 1 inning, maybe 2, the most he's going to go is a trip through that lineup, and that could be 2 innings. You have to find length from somebody. Is that Herring? Herring could probably give you 3 innings or so after throwing 35 pitches, but you have to weigh the risk. How much do you want to extend him in a game that, if you're being quite honest, you don't need to win? You want to win it, of course. I'll keep reiterating that. You just don't need it. But Herring could give you length. If you don't start Dutton, you're looking at Cade Anderson or Javen Coleman. And Javen Coleman, while he has had great moments throughout his career at LSU, it has not been great from a command standpoint for him this year, and that is why you have not seen him pitch very often as of late. Javen Coleman has thrown 22 and a third innings this season. He has walked 17 guys in those 22 and a third innings. When he's in the zone, he's very good. The opponent's hitting 200 off of him. He just has not been in the zone consistently enough, and because of that, he has not pitched since April 30th. It has been almost a month since Javen Coleman has pitched, and that was against Grambling in that 26-2 shellacking. He started that game. So if you throw him, one, you're going to be looking for command. Two, how much length could you really get out of him? He hasn't thrown in a month. Cade Anderson is kind of the same thing. Cade Anderson's been great in the midweek when you've put him against SEC competition for whatever the reason, bad luck here and there, whatnot. It hasn't been good. But that's a guy who is stretched out and could potentially give you some length. So I think it's one of those three guys, and I lean heavily towards Sam Dutton getting the ball in the opener role. Here's one of the things I want to see from LSU. I want to see the pitching bounce back. LSU down the stretch has pitched very, very well. We have documented that plenty here on this show. It is what started the turnaround for LSU. Now you have the offense kind of playing complementary baseball, and they look like a really good team at the current moment. And it's the offense joining up with the pitching right now that makes me believe this is sustainable and they can make a run. But I want to see the pitching bounce back for a couple of reasons. Number one, they've just been really good down the stretch, and I want to see them still have their confidence. Like, even if LSU loses Saturday, I want them to pitch well so they go into the NCAA tournament confident. Number two is actually the more important reason. So I guess you could say it should be number one. Let's say LSU falls into the loser's bracket of a regional. Let's say you win game one and the host finds a way to beat Holman. And you've burned Holman. A lot of people would think you're cooked. And that's totally respectable thinking. But a lot of people thought that last year too in Omaha, myself included. And you got a bunch of standout step-up performances from guys and got yourself back on track and came out of the loser's bracket and won the national title. So I damn sure am not going to sit here and tell you that a scenario like that wouldn't be possible. But that's why I'm so interested in how LSU pitches Saturday. Because I want to see if you can find guys that you feel comfortable having to put into that spot. If someone can step up right here when being called upon when some of your best are down. And if that's not Saturday, if you do go Herring and Guidry and Ack and all those guys, and you go all in to win and try to make it to Sunday, then I want to see it on Sunday, because then you're really going to be thin. But that's the one thing I want to see the rest of this tournament, however long LSU plays, is the pitching staff bounce back, and specifically a guy like Javen Coleman or Cade Anderson or Aiden Moffitt, who you haven't seen yet. Maybe a Cam Johnson. Can they go out there, have a great outing, and show that when the chips are down, they can step up for this team in case you end up in a situation like that in the NCAA tournament? Because here's the thing. LSU, in Jay's first year, had enough to win that Hattiesburg Regional. They went on the path they needed to. They won. They were in the catbird seat. The problem is they flat ran out of pitching when it got to Game 7. They just weren't deep enough. And they had taxed their staff, obviously, throughout the season through there because they had a handful of guys they could rely on. This year's team has more than a handful. Jump, Holman, Herring, Little, Guidry, Ulloa, Lure, Dutton. Like, that's 7 right there that I think everyone here would feel confident in, correct? But once you get past that, who is it? And if you fall into the loser's bracket or you get pushed to a game 7, you have to have guys step up. So that's really one thing I want to see for LSU the rest of this tournament is, can you find guys like that? For South Carolina, like we said, their pitching is obviously in worse shape than LSU's. They have played 4 straight days without a day off. I think for them, the starting pitching selection here is easy. For me, looking at South Carolina, I think it absolutely, positively has to be Roman Kimball. He has 7 starts on the year. He has not pitched yet in this tournament. He is Javen Coleman. When he's in the zone, he's really good. The opponent is hitting 194 off of Roman Kimball. The problem is 30 walks in 27 and 2/3 innings. He has more walks than innings pitched. And if that is a guy that they do go to, and again, 7 starts and has not pitched yet, that is someone that LSU could absolutely have some success against. The other interesting prospect there who could potentially go for South Carolina is Eli Jones, and I'm not really counting on that. And I only bring this up because of what they did with Chris Veach. So Chris Veach threw 66 pitches in relief on Tuesday. I was not expecting to see him Thursday night. You did. After just one day. Now, I get it. Eli Jones has been a starter for them. It's different. He threw 56 pitches on Wednesday. He's had 2 days. You could see him start potentially and go a very short spurt. But if it's not him, I would think it is Kimball. Outside of that, South Carolina has spent a lot of guys. Marlett threw today and got the win. He threw 57 pitches. That guy's not coming back. You look at Matthew Becker. He's now thrown, I believe he's now thrown north of 50 pitches in 2 different stints in this tournament. He's one of their best. He's probably not coming back. It's interesting. Jake McCoy threw 34 against LSU. You could maybe see him after a day. That's somebody available. Let's stick with guys who we don't expect to see. Chris Veach, you're not seeing him again. Daniel Eskew has started 2 games in this tournament. You're not going to see him again if you're South Carolina. Ty Good threw 60 pitches on Wednesday. You could see him potentially, but how long can he go? That's up for debate. Garrett Gainey threw 53 pitches on Wednesday, 2 days in between. You could see him, but how much can you get out of it? South Carolina is way further down on the list for LSU than LSU when it comes to pitching, and that gives LSU a decided advantage in this game. Because if LSU does want to go all in, again, you can use Herring, you can use Guidry, you can use Ack, you can use Ulloa, you can use those guys that you counted on down the stretch. South Carolina can't. That's why the day off is huge. So you're looking at the bottom of Carolina's pitching staff more than likely, or guys who have already thrown a lot and you just don't really know what you're going to get out of them at this point. I like LSU to have a pretty big offensive day, and that's the other thing I'm looking for. I want LSU's offense to keep going at the clip that they are. 9 runs against Ole Miss, 9 runs against Georgia, and 11 runs in each of the last 2 games against Kentucky and South Carolina. I want LSU's offense to keep going 1 through 9 like it has. I'm excited to see Jake Brown hopefully get another start in center field. For the life of me, I don't know why he wouldn't after the outing that he just had. But I just want to see them, because for me, that is the key right now to this being sustainable. Sure, you have a shot with Gage Jump and Luke Holman against anybody. You do. They've proven that down the stretch, and Holman's kind of proven it throughout the course of the entire year. He's kept you in games, even ones that you lost. But what has tied this together is the offense now playing complementary baseball. You now have settled on the lineup. You're now getting production 1 through 9. It's not just Tommy White, Jared Jones, Michael Braswell somewhere in there, and Steven Milam. Like, it's all of them. And that, to me, is why this is sustainable. On the pitching side of it for LSU, you have got to do a better job against the top of the South Carolina lineup. We talked about that when we previewed the game for Thursday. The top 4 in that lineup are lethal. After that, the next 5, it's not a murderer's row. Like, you can get outs, and plenty of them. But you have to do a much better job than you did on Thursday night. The top 4 hitters in South Carolina's lineup reached base a combined 10 times in that game and drove in a combined 7 runs in that game. Now, granted, 6 of them were from Cole Messina, but you had 5 hits, 5 walks. And, you hit Blake Jackson. So actually they reached 7 times in the game. Or 11 times. They reached 11 times in the game. Take it back one more time. You also hit Bringling. They reached 12 times in the ballgame. 12 times they reached base, drove in 7 runs, scored 8 of the 10 runs South Carolina had. You must do a better job there. I know that sounds ridiculous. Get the best hitters out. Sure. But when you have a lineup that 5 through 9 ain't great, it puts an even bigger emphasis on that, and that's what LSU has to do a better job because they weren't good enough at that on Thursday night. LSU has an uphill climb, one way or the other. There has never been a team win this tournament from Tuesday in this current format. There have been 3 teams reach the final, all of them lost, and all of them lost convincingly. LSU did it in 2018, got beat up pretty good. Florida did it in 2022, got beat up pretty good. Texas A&M did it last year, got beat up pretty good. It's a hard thing to do, but LSU's going to try, and South Carolina's the next foe. I'll be very interested to see how they handle it. They don't need it, but wouldn't we all love to see them win it? Absolutely. Go get yourself another title. This would be number 13 in the LSU Invitational, or as the lay people call it, the SEC Tournament. That's going to wrap it up. Y'all smash the like, get subscribed if you haven't already on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app, and be here for more next time on Musso at the Box.